Hey everyone, today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to talk about a topic related to cars again, I know. But today I have with me my colleague Shasank, also known as Shank, and we're going to talk about something called the Sedanocalypse. And what that is this is a trend that's coming up in the US car market where people are moving away from buying hatchbacks and sedans and are moving towards buying SUVs and specifically a specific kind of SUV called a crossover, just somewhere between a traditional large SUV and a hatchback. So I'd like to ask Shashank, what do you think about this trend, and could you explain in your own words what's going on here?
All right. So starting with what happened maybe a couple years ago, FCA, one of the bigger manufacturers in the country, stopped making the only sedan that they were making, the 200.
Right.
And then the other two big manufacturers, GM and Ford, sort of followed suit. If you look at news from a few months ago, Ford killed off all its cars. The
Right.
only car they make now is the Mustang, and everything else that they have is either an SUV or a crossover or a pickup truck.
Right.
And then you have GM, which recently announced that it's going to shut down 4 of its plants, which more or less make most of their small cars or sedans. One of which is the Cruise, which is made a few hundred miles from here at Lordstown in Ohio. So you see that everyone's sort of giving up on these sedans.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask how I feel about it, that sort of scares me, but it's also a very interesting proposition and puts me in a place where I have all these mixed feelings. How do you feel about it?
I feel like it's somewhere between a trend and more of a manufactured thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll explain it a little bit. There are some personal factors or personal reasons why people seem like they prefer a larger vehicle or a crossover.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main things is the perception of safety. Like a crossover is safer than a sedan because it's higher up above the ground. So it gives you a perception of I'm riding above everyone else, I'm a bit more in control of the situation, or it feels like I'm getting a bit more respect on the road, people aren't cutting me off, some things of that nature. Then there's the marketing aspect of it, which is the manufactured part of it, which is something like if you remember the old ad for some SUV in India, I remember it was Reclaim Your Life. Right.
I remember the Tata Safari. That used
Yeah.
to be one of my favorite ads back in the day.
Yeah, so that marketing of this is a sporty vehicle and it's for outdoorsy kind of people and it's an active lifestyle, these kinds of things coming up in the marketing. A combination of these two factors is what I feel like is driving this trend. What are your thoughts on that?
You raise an interesting point when you talk about lifestyle, and a couple things that happened recently piqued my interest very much in this topic. Let me dive into that. The first one was the other day I was on a business trip coming back to Columbus, and we crossed this Chevy Tahoe, which is arguably one of the bigger SUVs out there. It was towing maybe a 20-inch longboat, and maybe it's the end of the boating season, so someone was bringing their boat back from the marina or something.
Right.
And as I looked at it, and as we overtook that, the car or the SUV with the boat in tow, it somehow just felt right. The SUV just felt right for that situation.
Right, absolutely.
And the second piece that I experienced recently was I had a trip down to Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana over this past summer.
Right.
Arguably larger states than Ohio, with a lot of wide open land and a lot of wilderness and a lot of open spaces where a so-called lifestyle can thrive, right? Where you can do a lot of adventurous things, go hiking, go kayaking in the rivers and that kind of stuff.
A lot more rocky or a bit more ups and downs, like hilly areas, things of that nature.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not like Ohio where it's just flat and plain.
Like lends itself to more of an off-road lifestyle.
Exactly. And we had a rental car which was a Ford Edge, which is again, your typical crossover.
Right.
I felt myself craving for something bigger, even a pickup truck. And you know me, I drive a teeny tiny Civic Si. I like small lit sports cars.
Right.
I was pretty taken back by that. So here's my argument. The US is a big country in terms of land. Everything's bigger here in terms of the landscape, the infrastructure, places you can get to, things you can do. And when I say things you can do, things like going camping, sleeping under the stars, sleeping in a forest with your tent. I have a friend who actually did that. He toured through Utah all by himself. He slept under the stars, put up a tent every night. You can go boating, fishing, kayaking, or, lifestyle activities are a big thing here. And people like to do those. And I think people are buying cars that let them do that.
Right.
What do you think?
So cars that augment a certain lifestyle, and not just with the storage space and all that, but the car itself can be taken very close to the location. You don't have to sort of rent a car or something for that, or hire something, perhaps. Yeah, that's an interesting point of augmenting a lifestyle. But how much of that is something that people were yearning for previously, and how much of that is something that has been just manufactured? Because we all know people say things like, I like being outdoorsy, or I like hiking and all that, and in reality you might just go hiking once a year or something of that nature. So that social desirability aspect of it, how much of it is keeping up with the Joneses, and how much of it is I really want to go out there and climb like a rock face, or go in the mud, or autocross and that kind of stuff.
So here's my argument. I'll flip that a little bit and say, so when someone buys a car, they have an aspirational note attached to it. They want to buy the car to become what they would like to be, versus they buy a car for what they are. And it's completely fair, because all of us are trying to, get better. Like with my car, I try to get better at driving. I try to take the racing line if I'm getting on a highway ramp. Try to get better at my times, my gear shifts and things. Everyone's trying to aspire to something, and when they're buying a car, the car is seen as an enabler of that. And that's where, my big argument all the time is, if you want space and functionality, a minivan is the best car for you. Because you can get all your friends in there, or all your family in there, and whoever's sitting in the back can watch a movie while you're driving. There's automatic doors, automatic seating, and seating that goes under the roof, under the floor of the car. And people live in vans as well, so it's like a house on wheels.
Yeah, and it's a safety aspect of it as well. Secure, like there's so many safety features in minivans, and the sliding doors and all of those. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But a minivan is not an aspirational vehicle. Exactly. It's a practical vehicle, absolutely. But that's where we talk about desirability all the time when we're talking about product design. That's where the aspirational piece comes in. Everyone's trying to scale up to something that they want to be, and the car, whichever be it, the sedan or the SUV or crossover, enables that. And I think crossovers and SUVs enable that more than a typical sedan. What do you think?
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote from some senior executive from Mazda when they released an SUV, a 3-row SUV, where he said that people are buying these instead of minivans because when they drive, sometimes they don't want to bring their entire family. They want something that caters to their entire family, but also caters to their own personal spirited driving. And that is one of the reasons they are seeing this trend. So you brought up the point of aspirational and doing something for yourself. There's also the aspect of you want to avoid a stigma. Like if you look at the physics of it, or just the practicality aspect of it, a minivan gives you a good gas mileage. It's very aerodynamic. It's space-wise. There's a lot more room in it to put a bunch of stuff. So helps you in terms of utility, but aspirationally it's not, it doesn't ignite your fancy or your passion about driving or something like that.
Or how James May would put it, it doesn't give you the fizz.
Yeah.
That brings another point. You talked about practicality and the stigma around it. I like to think that crossovers and SUVs have this really beautiful combination where not only are they giving you this channel to get to an aspirational status, but at the same time you're not being, you know, uh, you're not being, for want of a better word, a douche while you're doing that. Like if you're driving a two-door car, like my girlfriend gives me crap all the time because the third person in my car has to do all sorts of gymnastics to get in the back because I drive a coupe.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm the douche there, clearly. So in a sense, you have this car which lets you do a lot of things, but at the same time you can take your family with you. You can take your friends with you. So you're the nicer guy in that setup, nicer guy or girl, or you're not only signaling aspiration, but you're also signaling virtue, which is being the person who cares about everyone. And that's where the size and the multi-row seating and all that's offered by crossovers in comparison to sedans comes into place.
So bringing everyone together, that kind of aspect.